Welcome to Trial Talk, insights from experienced New York trial attorney Michael Joseph.
Hello and welcome back to Trial Talk, insights from experienced New York trial attorney Michael Joseph. With more than 2 decades in practice, Michael has built his career representing New Yorkers and families whose lives were turned upside down by preventable injuries. I'm Kevin Rosenquist, and today we're talking about what happens when a child gets hurt at school, on the playground, or at daycare, and who's responsible when it happens. Michael, welcome back.
Thank you.
So when a child gets hurt at school or daycare, what's the first thing parents need to understand about how the law treats these cases?
Well, I think there's a difference between, say, a private school and a public school. With the case of a public school, you really have to understand that the clock is ticking. You only have 90 days to file a notice of claim, and the courts have become way more stringent on these. They're really going out of their ways to protect municipalities. So one way they're doing that is by disqualifying or not giving permission for late notices of claim. So you have to file something called a notice of claim within 90 days, and it has to be with the right department. Now, for example, a lot of people get hurt on a city school, and they think they just file a notice of claim with the city of New York. But they don't realize there's also the New York City Department of Education, which is technically a separate entity. So you have to file a notice of claim. It has to be sufficient. You have to provide enough information, and 2, you have to make sure you serve it on the right entity, which is important because if you don't serve a notice of claim within 90 days, then you have to go to court. You have to ask for leave to file a late notice of claim, and you have to make a showing that the municipality or the city or the Department of Education had essential facts of the underlying accident, which means that they know that they were at fault or responsible for the accident. Of course, they don't ever admit that, but if you can get a copy of a report, that sometimes helps. Photograph sometimes helps. But as I said, the courts are getting very, very tough on these, and they're really trying to keep people from suing, and they're in fact going out of their way to deny motions for late notice of claims now that they would have granted without blinking 10, 15 years ago. So
Really?
yeah, they're really getting tough, and it's really important to get the notice of claim filed. And I think you also have to understand that it's important in early investigation, especially if you have a significant injury, a significant laceration, a significant fracture, which are some of the most common types of injuries that we see in playgrounds in New York City and even outside New York City. So, for example, a few different types of playground conditions we see are gaps where children's feet can slip into that aren't protected and covered, sharp edges that cause lacerations or scars, and falls that cause fractures or head conditions. You're supposed to have a certain type of protective apparatus on the ground. A lot of people use wood chips. There's other certain types of matting that have to be of a certain thickness. There's actually a guide published by the United States Consumer Protection Agency that has a whole ton of regulations, different types of standards that these playgrounds are supposed to adhere to. And one of the big ones is if you're using wood chips, 6 inches of wood chips. That provides a pretty good fall protection, and it disperses the force of the fall so it doesn't end up on a child's bone, doesn't bear the impact. So we want to get an expert out there as soon as an injury happened, if you have a bad fracture, to measure it. Because any day, once they learn it's an accident, they can just go dump more wood chips down.
Dump more, yeah.
And then they take pictures after they dump the wood chips down. Or, chain bridges are another big one we see where they don't quite measure up, and like the edge of the bridge doesn't quite touch the other part of the playground apparatus. So you have kids' feet get in there. Another big issue is signage. For example, not every playground is suitable for every child. So we want to get pictures of what signage they had up. A playground equipment that's okay maybe for a middle schooler isn't necessarily safe for a nursery school kid. Mm-hmm. So we want to see what kind of warnings they have. Was there if it's a 12 and above playground, was there a sign there telling kids that are maybe 4 or 6 they shouldn't be on it? So there's a lot of early investigations are critical. Getting pictures of the injury-causing conditions are critical. Sometimes you want to get an expert out there to view it or to measure it. How far apart were the steps? Were the steps or if it's a climbing type of a thing, like a monkey bars, were the bars too far apart so that the kids at certain ages just physically can't grasp them and are going to fall? Same thing with gliders. You want to measure the fall protection under a glider. What's the height of the glider? Is it too high where if a kid falls, he's going to get hurt. These are all types. There's a lot of intricate safety and design criteria that go into playgrounds, and where these playgrounds are not up to par or not up to spec, we can sue if the kids get hurt, but we have to be able to prove the case, and we have to timely maintain the right to sue, which means filing the timely notice of claim.
I tell you, that's changed quite a bit. I don't believe those laws existed when I was a kid, when we had metal slides and like these jagged, jagged hooks and stuff on the swings and all that. So good. I'm glad that I have a 5-year-old, so I'm glad to hear this. And I will, to your point, I have noticed when I take him to newer parks, I see signs with ages on there, which it's a new thing for me that I haven't seen before.
Yeah, a lot of kids have gotten hurt because they're playing on equipment that really isn't safe for them.
Yeah.
It has to be safe for the age of the kid that's actually utilizing the equipment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's public schools we talked about. How does all this change when it's a private school?
When it's private school, the benefit is you don't have to file a notice of claim. Okay, that's the benefit. Really, the same specifications apply whether you're on a private school or a public school. So same thing, a private school or a church or a religious entity that's providing a playground or a daycare, they all have the same responsibility to provide a reasonably safe playground, and a playground that's in accordance with the specifications at the time that the playground is installed. And they have to, obviously maintain the playground. It's foreseeable, for example, that wood chips are going to get kicked away as kids run away. So they have to maintain it and put them back or rake them back or dump more usually dump more every fall. You have to make sure the matting is appropriate. And make sure, for example, if you have chains that all of a sudden have become a little bit worn and now they weren't dangerous when they were installed, but now they are, and you can see it, you have to make adjustments to the equipment itself to make sure it's maintained in a safe manner.
And obviously, there's some injuries that are going to happen during sports or physical activities. How does the law balance sort of normal risks of play with situations where there was negligence, whether that's on the maintenance, the coach, the supervisor of the kids? How does that work?
Well, generally, when you play a sport, you accepted certain risks. You accepted risks inherent in the sport itself, right? Football, you're consenting to physical contact. What you're not consenting to, on the other hand, is those risks that are outside the scope of the sport. For example, getting jumped in a locker room, right? Because even if you're playing sports even if the kid's playing sports, playing a rough sport, it has to stop at the field, and the coaches have to exercise apparent supervision or appropriate supervision to keep the kids safe. So even if things get a little heated, they have to intervene, they have to break it up. We've had a number of school assault cases, for example, where kids are attacked by other teams or even kids on their own school after a playground thing or a school got out of hand, an event got out of hand, and really teachers are there and they don't see it, or teachers are there and they don't stop it. So we've had a number of those cases. They have an obligation to keep the kids safe, and yes, they're not responsible for ordinary risks in playing certain sports. However, they do have a responsibility to protect kids from risks that aren't inherent in those sports, and they also have a responsibility to provide a safe premises. A number of examples are, if you let kids play lacrosse, for example, okay, fine, there's going to be contact, there's going to be running, you can't stop every injury, but you can make sure the field is safe so that when we run on the field, they don't trip and fall on defective artificial turf. Mm-hmm. Or another example you see is on some of these jump parks or trampoline parks. You see a lot of injuries in there. Yes, trampolining and jumping is an inherent risk, but you also have to make sure that the sides or the perimeters are such that if the kid falls onto them from jumping up, those aren't so hard that they're going to break a bone when they land on it or tear a rotator cuff when they land on the siding too. So one of the things you have to think about is the venue itself or the place where the activity is occurring has to be reasonably safe for the activity. Mm-hmm. And if it's not, in certain circumstances, you can sue because even though you've assumed the risk of trampolining or going to a trampoline park and jumping around and maybe crashing into another kid, you didn't necessarily assume the risk of falling onto something that's so hard that if you fall onto it, it's foreseeable you're going to get hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've known some people who've gotten hurt at trampoline parks and they've all been adults. So One of my buddies blew out his ACL on a trampoline park. Every time I go with my son, I'm like, oh, I don't love this, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting liability there for sure. So you talked about how public schools in New York City run by the Department of Education. So there's different entities and how the notice of claim, the strict filing deadlines. What do parents need to know about the process to ensure that they don't run out of time?
You have to know you have 90 days and you're on a clock, ticking clock. The clock starts to tick as soon as the accident happens. And you have to
Okay.
really, find a professional, find a lawyer who knows what they're doing, who's been down this road. Make sure you know what school district it happened on and what school district your kids go to. Because, for example, it could be if you're Long Island, Westchester, every little town has its own school district. And if you get hurt, for example, what we would typically do, even if there's ambiguity, serve everybody. If you're not sure if it's Nassau County Schools or the Union Free School District of Wantagh, schools in Wantagh serve both. Serve the town of Wantagh, serve the Union Free School District of Wantagh, to serve Nassau County, serve everybody. Just take a shotgun approach and protect yourself at all times, especially these days where the courts are being less and less lenient and more favorable towards the towns. So I think you have to protect yourself at all times, especially these days when the courts are not protecting the parents, they're not protecting the kids, they're not protecting the little guy. They're protecting the cities, they're protecting the towns, they're protecting the transit authority, and they're protecting the educational departments.
Why the shift towards that? You said that's changed over the years.
I think it's probably just who's become a judge. I think we've had a lot more defense lawyers or people from the defense background who are a little disgruntled, and or people who've come from, say, the city's corporation council or the transit authority that have just kind of have gotten to the bench. So now they're trying to judicially rewrite the law a little bit,
Okay.
be more favorable to the entities rather than the people.
hmm Do you feel like parents might hesitate to take legal action because they don't want to cause trouble for the school?
Well, I think definitely if the kids are still going to the school, they think that there might be repercussions, and that unfortunately does cause some parents to delay. I think in general, I've never really seen schools retaliate against the kid. I think the people at the school do generally feel bad for the kids that get hurt, and if they know an injury shouldn't happen, they definitely treated in a professional manner for the most part. Certainly in a city of New York, I would say, if it's a New York City school, the school system is so big and the litigation aspect of it is usually handled by corporation counsel, which is very far removed from the school itself. So it's almost like completely different entities, basically. So there's so much distance between the people who are involved or who are running the school and corporation counsel. At all times, the corporation counsel or the city will just kind of evaluate the case and look at the facts of what happened and assess whether there's liability and make an offer to resolve the case without really getting the school even involved. Tends to be a little bit different in some of the suburban schools, but even still in the suburban schools, I think the people who do get involved in schools generally do care for the kids. So they don't necessarily, they kind of understand why what they're doing what they're doing. And they understand also, I think that parents want to make a difference and make the school safer for other kids. So I think there is at least that understanding, which usually we don't really see retaliation.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because I mean, like we love my kid's school, and we would be very lenient with them. But to your point, I think most good schools care about the children and would want the parents to feel safe with leaving their kids there and do the right thing and all that. So that's a good point for sure. For anyone listening who's gone through something like this, what should they expect from their attorney when handling a school or daycare injury case? What should they look for?
I think you should look for somebody who's done it before, who's been down this road, who knows what experts to contact, to know where the regulations are and what the standards are, and who has investigators that can get out there and take pictures of the conditions. And I think you want somebody who regularly handles personal injury and who litigates against municipalities, so they kind of know what you have to litigate against municipality as a gauntlet. Okay, you have to file a notice of claim, then you have to do a 50H hearing, then you have to file a summons and complaint within usually a year and 90 days. If the kid's a minor, then obviously that extends it out so they're 18. But you want to be able to have someone who can document the conditions early, get the notice of claim filed, get it done right, so you preserve your rights to sue. And then someone who has enough knowledge to be able to prove the case, be able to identify the standards and have the evidence to show that the standards weren't followed or were disregarded.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense to me. Okay, well, that's it for today's episode of Trial Talk, insights from experienced New York trial attorney Michael Joseph. If your child was hurt at school, daycare, or on a playground, visit newyorktriallawyers.org to learn more about your options and connect with Michael directly. Thank you for listening. Very much appreciate it. Please leave us a review, subscribe to our channel. We got lots more stuff coming your way. Michael, always great to chat with you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.